giving honor to God, who's the head of my life, to the family, certainly to Bishop Richardson, Bishop Stockton, and to all of the clergy. Let me give special thanks to our brother and minister beloved Reverend Tim Gilligan, who thought it not robbery to open the doors of this church so we could have this service for AJ. He never asked what was going to be said and what was going to be done. He said, this is a house for everybody. And it is the strength that I believe, Bishop, that God gave him, which is why he's blessed with this congregation. I don't know if I would open my doors for Al Sharpton if I was Tim, but he did. And I want him to know that we appreciate him and his congregation. I'm also grateful to Reverend A.R. Bernard, who pastors one of the largest ministries in this country, who came down from New York, said, I want to be here with you. And he is here. Also, Reverend DeVestoon, our field director, Reverend Stephen Marshall, Reverend Steffi Bott, they're all traveling with me from Man. And I want to thank Sabrina Fulton, the mother of Trayvon Martin. And certainly I want to give special thanks to my brother, my little brother, who has risen every occasion to stand for what's right. I call him the Attorney General of Black America, Attorney Ben Crump. I want you to turn to the book of Deuteronomy, 22nd chapter, 6th and 7th verse, and it reads, if a bird's nest happens to be before you along the way, in any tree or on the ground, with young ones or eggs, with the mother sitting on the young or on the eggs, you shall not take the mother with the young. You shall surely let the mother go and take the young for yourself, that it may be well with you and that you may prolong your days. Many years ago, I got the call about a case in Florida of a young man killed at boot camp called Martin Lee Anderson, from a young lawyer I did not know named Ben Crump. And ever since then, many years now, every time he called me, I came because he never misled me. Many people do things to enrich themselves, many to get publicity. And as stated here, and I appreciate everybody saying that because we all have different callings. God calls us all to do different things at the same time. You read the Bible, God didn't tell everybody to do the same thing. God gives you different gifts and different talent. You heard the choir. Some sing soprano, some sing alto, some sing tenor, some baritone, some just move their lips, can't sing at all. but it all takes a choir. And my calling was social justice. Some callings are other part. All of us operate off our belief in God. So I heard my friend and brother introduce me, who heads our Tallahassee chapter, Reverend R.B. Holmes, talk about the cameras. And he's right, we didn't come for the cameras, but if me coming helps you get here, I want you cameras to show up. I don't apologize for that, because the world needs to know that we shouldn't be at a funeral this morning. They want to bury what happened to AJ. We are not going to let you bury it. We're not going to be quiet about it. And we're not going to apologize for standing up for it. We are not going away quietly. What happened here is wrong, and we come to stand with this family to call wrong wrong. These strong women, young activists that have stood with Pam and these children, they're not the problem. They are trying to expose the problem. And people that will say, well, that is not my way. I believe we ought to do something more quiet and settled. Well, if you scared, say you scared. And then sit down and shut up and let some of us that ain't scared say what need to be said. But don't distort what we're saying. Lady asked me this morning, I work out early in the morning, said to me, is there going to be violence? I said, is there going to be violence? Shooting somebody through a locked door is violent. These young folks that's marched and stood up, they have not been violent. The violence is what happened to AJ. Don't act like we're violent. We're here because of violence. Well, are they angry? Yes, we're angry, but we're not mad. We discipline our anger to get justice and fairness. And we can't fight hate and violence by operating with hate and violence. Because that only helps those that want to act like AJ was like that. We go out here and do something violent, they'll say, see, that's what she was afraid of. We got more sense than that. But don't act like we should not be concerned. Don't act like there's something that is incongruous to me about how y'all can talk about everything, but I haven't heard the state officials talk about a woman shooting through a door at a mother standing up for her children. I mean, I'm confused. When you have state officials that could stand up for some that are indicted for espionage but can't stand up for a mother that's just standing up for her 4 children. I heard it said that Florida is where woke dies. Well, what is the opposite of woke? The opposite of woke is to be sleep. And we're not going to sleep no more. Maybe we took a nap and let you get where you got, but we are woke now, and you will not ever get away with this. Now, Bishop Richardson didn't say this, Tim didn't say this, Sharpton. Blame it all on me. But I want us to be clear that there is no way we can live in a country that people that are not under threat can take the lives of unarmed people and it not be a threat to all of us. Reporter asked me, Reverend Mayor, why did you come? I said, very simple. And I want to be clear. I did not come for any other reason. And when I talked to Pamela about her daughter, and she told me about Isaac and Israel and Africa and Titus. Many of y'all see me on TV but don't know I was raised by a single mother. Father left when I was 10. I grew up on welfare and food stamps. Only thing between me and jail was my mother. Most of my friends went to jail doing wrong. My mother made me go to church. The only thing that protected me from the gangs was my mother. And when I heard their story, I thought about my story. That's why I read this from Deuteronomy, because too often in our communities, particularly in the black community, all we can depend on is our mothers. I'm not down on fathers. Sometimes the social order forces certain situations, but mama's there when nobody's there. And that's why when this woman degraded them and they ran and got their mother, the mother stood in the way. Don't you feel guilty about nothing. Your mama chose to stand in danger's way for you. She chose you over her. That's what mothers do. That's why we celebrate your mother. The God she served, the Jesus she served, will give her rest. She was a good mother. Isaac, Israel, Africa, Titus. Don't grow up feeling guilty. Don't say mama wouldn't have died if it wasn't for me. No, mama chose to stand up for you. Because mama knew if she allowed people to degrade you and she not stand up for you, that you'd grow up with a feeling that you were something that could be degraded. She rather showed that you were somebody than to risk the danger of her being silent. And the one thing I want y'all to do for us is I want you to go and be everything she wanted you to be. I told Isaac, I want you to go on to college and want your brothers and sisters to go on and be something. And if you don't have the money, call me. Say, you showed up at my mama's funeral. I need to go to college. Because just like I showed up here today for you, I want to sit at your graduation. And I want you to put your fists up and say, I'm AJ's boy. What they meant for bad, God will make good. Then they said, I hope y'all don't bring race in it. When this woman called them the N-word, when she said, this ain't no Underground Railroad slaves, she brought race in it. Don't act like National Action Network, NAACP, Sharpton brought in race. She brought in race. You can't take back what she said. In fact, she didn't take it back. She admitted she said it. And why don't you admit if it was the other way around and a black woman had shot through a door at a white kid, you would have arrested her that night? Pam, Friday I was in Mississippi for the 60th anniversary of the killing of Medgar. I went to the house that Medgar lived in. He was doing a voter registration drive, and he drove home that night, got out his car in his driveway, took my daughter with me and stood in that driveway. Man blew his brains out to give us the right to vote. I sat with his wife, who's 90 years old now, Merle Evans. We're getting ready to have a march on Washington, August 26th, the anniversary of Dr. King's march, his son and daughter-in-law and I. And I thought about how many people suffered, paid a price, died to bring us this far. And it wasn't only blacks, it was whites that marched. Goodman, Cheney, and Schwerner died. Viola Luisa died. And when I looked down here in Florida the other day, getting the newsreels of what was going on around AJ, don't get confused. I saw young white kids with black kids marching. Right here. Those young activists that made this issue an issue were of all communities, because right is right and wrong is wrong, and we got to stand together against wrong. We must not ever forget that God uses us to operate in the time in which we live. And sometimes, Dr. Stockton, Bishop Stockton, we want to pick the part of the scriptures that we like. We like the results without what makes the results. We want the omelet without the egg. But you got to go by the whole thing. You know, Richardson, I go to some churches, preachers say to me, Reverend Al, we're honored to have you, but stay away from, civil rights and politics. Just stay in the Word. And I said, okay, well, maybe you got a different Bible than I got. So give me your edition of the Bible. Because my Bible, the second book, was about the exodus of slaves from slavery. Politics, well, my Bible had David made king. That's political. Solomon king. That's political. Esther went against the genocide of a whole people. If you take all that out of the Bible, you ain't got much left. You want to shout, but you don't want to work. I grew up in Church of God in Christ. People talking about one day I'm going home and get my rest. Rest from what? You ain't done no work to get no rest from. Soon I will be done with the troubles of the world. You ain't done nothing about the troubles of the world. I was not born at a time that they walked to the Red Sea. I wasn't born at a time they went to the Jordan. I wasn't there when Goliath mocked the Israeli army. But I was there when they shot Trayvon. I was there when they choked Eric Garner. I was around when they put their knee on George Floyd's neck. And I was around when you shot through the door at AJ, and the same God that was at the Red Sea, the same God that was at the Jordan, the same God can come into Ocala, Florida. God ain't stopped hearing us. We stopped hearing God. If we stand up, God will hold us up. If we would have the faith, God will give us the power. I know some of you are afraid of the opposition, but they ain't got more money than God. They ain't got more power than God. They ain't got more strength than God. God will make a way for his children. If you got the faith, and faith is not what you could figure out. Faith is not what you could calculate. Faith is not the end of a well-laid plan. Faith, Pastor Bernard, is when it don't make sense, when you can't figure it out, when you don't know what it's going to add up to, but you step out anyhow because you don't believe he brought you this far to leave you now. We didn't come by calculation. We didn't come by just a strategic plan. We come this far by faith, leaning on the Lord, trusting in his holy word. He never failed me yet. I hope all of you that are here will help this family. I hope that y'all will support these young sisters that started a fund for the family. I hope all the churches will write a check. Don't say we with you. Take out a pen and write a check. I've already written mine. We're going to write some more. I want these boys to show what AJ would be proud of. I want this for children to be examples. And I want them to know that we're going to stand up all the way through these legal proceedings. They're going to try every maneuver to drop these charges. But when they shot at AJ, they were shooting at all our mamas. And we can't let this go. We can't hear no rationalize because we shouldn't be here this morning. She can't cry alone. These boys and girls is going to go through some rough days. And we got to be there for them because it could be us. If they allow an unarmed, caring mother to go without being accounted for, it puts all of us at risk. I don't understand. I searched through all of the TV, I searched through all of the newspapers, and I don't see the outrage. I mean, they get outraged about certain things taught in school. You get outraged about migrants coming to Texas. You get outraged about those that have a different lifestyle. But I've been checking my Google. I can't find out, does DeSantis have laryngitis? I'll tell you this, Pam, and I'll let the program go on. I told a congregation yesterday in upstate New York, when I started getting known, Dr. Bishop Richardson, reporter called me from the New York Times, said he wanted to do a profile on me and he had to travel with me. And I said, what does that mean? He said, I'm going to run with you for a week or two, see what you do, write it down. We want to understand where you're going and who you are. And we went, and he sat with me in my radio show. He sat with me other interviews, sat in some strategy meetings, sat in some other gatherings. And Crump, we went to different events, different affairs. Got to Saturday morning action rally. Every Saturday we do a rally. And in the staff meeting, one of the staff members said to me, Reverend Al, you know you can't bring him to church with you tomorrow. I said, why not? He can't write my story without going to church. He said, well, you know, he may not understand how we have church. I said, yeah, but that's part of my story. And I told him, we went on the rest of the day, and I told him when I dropped him off that night, I said, I'm going to pick you up about 8 in the morning. I want to bring you to church with me. And Pastor Tim, he says, I've always been intrigued by the black church. I'm glad you're doing that. And I looked at him, I said, I didn't know whether to be insulted or not. I said, well, what you mean? He said, well, you know, my church, we're so quiet and serene. And you all are so passive and expressive. Maybe you can explain it to me. I said, all right. We got the service the next morning. Pastor Bernard, we stood out in the vestibule. And I was getting ready to come down and sit next to my pastor on the pulpit. And as I got ready to leave him to be seated in the back, he said, let me ask you a question. I said, what? He says, look down on the left side, the left aisle. There's a man that keeps doing his hands like this, up and down. Well, what does that mean? I said, well, you don't know that man's story. So that man, 5 years ago, had been diagnosed with cancer. They told him he had 6 months to live. He came that Wednesday night to prayer meeting. And he got on his knees. I was sitting on the pulpit, and I heard him saying, Lord, you're a doctor that never lost a patient. There's more medicine in the hem of your garment than all the pharmacies in town. If it be your will, I want you to heal my body. That was 4.5 years ago, and every time he comes in the church house and he think about what God did for him, all he can do is just clap his hands. I got ready to go. He said, wait a minute, but there's a lady in the choir. She doing this. Keep waving her hand, and she waving at somebody. What's she doing? I said, oh, no, that lady came home one night. Her house had burned to the ground. She didn't have no insurance. She didn't have nothing left. But she said that the Lord giveth, and the Lord taketh away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. And somehow God brought back everything she lost. And when she thinks about how she lost everything and God brought everything back, all she do is just wave her hand. I said, I got to go to the pulpit now. And he said, wait, I got to ask you one more. I said, what's that? He said, there's a lady in the center aisle, about 4 rows back. She keeps jumping out of her seat. And as she jump up, she kind of leans to the side. Look like she gonna fall down. But she don't fall down. But she can't stand up. Explain to me what that is. I said, oh, you don't know that lady's story. That lady came up from the South and built herself up in the North. Got married, had a little boy and a little girl. Her and her husband owned a corner store, had a little construction company. They did well, moved out to the Queens section of New York with middle-class folk. Used to buy a Cadillac every year. One day when she woke up, her husband had walked out with her daughter from an earlier marriage. Had a child with his stepchild. Abandoned her and a little boy and a little girl. She ended up watching them come and take the Cadillac back. She came and tried to keep the bills going, but they turned the lights and gas off. She couldn't pay the utilities. Finally, she couldn't keep the house any longer. She had to move into the heart of the ghetto. She got on welfare, got food stamps, did side jobs as a domestic worker. She used to walk, her little boy would walk her to the subway to go downtown to scrub floors. And she would tell him, don't worry about nothing. God will make a way. I don't know when. I don't know how. But God will make a way somehow. And she's lived to see that little girl and that little boy grow up and be somebody. And when she think about how she lost everything, but God brought her through anyhow and brought her children through, brought a little girl and little boy through. She jumps up out of her seat, leans to the side, and just jumps up and down. Pastor Bernard, I stepped away from him, but I got 3 steps away from him, and I turned back around, and I told him a reason I know her story is I'm her little boy. He walks with me. He talks with me. He tells me that I'm his own. God will. God will. God will. God will make a way. Yes, he will. Yes, he will. Yes, he will.